Hey, what's up, everyone? Welcome to Shaping Success. My name is Wes Tankersley. If you can do me a big favor, if you're watching this on Facebook, please do a like or a watch party. If you're listening to this on the podcast, like, share, and help review it. Help me to grow the show. Tell people why you listen to Shaping Success. Today's guest is a returning guest. His name is Mouw. He was a brittle diabetic. He's got a new book out, and I wanted to have him back on to talk a little bit more about his story. We'll get to that interview as soon as we get through this word from our sponsor.
Yes, come in.
So I have
Madamania knows what you want. Madamania knows all.
that's great.
You want an audience to watch your short films.
No, actually, I need...
You want to market your successful podcast.
No, I actually...
You want to live stream video games.
Actually, I want to be able to do it all at once in front of a live audience.
I want to be able to do it all the time. You want to be able to do it all at the same time.
Uppercut.
Okay, I got it. See? Madamania knows the solution.
And now, here's your host of Shaping Success, Wes Tankersley.
All right, everyone, thanks for tuning in. Today's guest is a returning guest, Mouw. Brandon, welcome back to the show.
Thank you so much for having me back. It's such a pleasure.
Hey, man, it's good to have you back here and talk a little bit about it after you've got this new book out. Can you tell us what the name of that book is here real quick, and then we'll talk a little bit about it?
Yep, it's called I'm Still Kicking.
I'm Still Kicking, and you sent me a copy of it. I got a chance to read it. I just finished it. It was a pretty quick read for me. I mean, I think it normally a book takes me 2-3 weeks, and I was through it within a week because it was just so interesting. Listening to the story that you have, if someone is listening for the first time, can you just kind of give us a brief synopsis of what you went through and how you got where you're at today?
Yeah, the book is kind of a culmination of my life, but kind of what allowed me to get through something that was really difficult. So I grew up at the age of 3. I was diagnosed as a type 1 diabetic. All was well with my health and in the world until I was in my late 20s, and I had really bad kidney stones that destroyed my kidney, turning me into an uncontrollable diabetic, and then had a few more surgeries, and it turned out that I needed a pancreas-only transplant, which was super rare, not covered by insurance. I had to raise the money, and 2.5 years ago, I had the transplant, and I'm still here to talk about what kind of got me through that and to help motivate others to keep on kicking.
Yeah, and it's really exciting because the last time we talked, and that's why I said just want a brief synopsis, because I want to break it down a little bit. I want to talk a little bit about the book, but I don't want to give too much away because I'm telling you, I was reading through that thing and I got to like the last 2 chapters when this pancreas transplant happens, and I'm just like reading as fast as I can and turning the page as fast as I can because I wanted to hear what happened. Even though I knew what happened, it was one of those things where it was just like, he's going to get it. It's going to happen. Like the hair was standing up on my neck. And there's just this whole story that drug you through, that you were dragged through, and you did all these things. And it was just exciting to hear, that story. So you grew up on an egg farm that kind of went south, right? Like it was really successful. And then I think we talked about it last time. You didn't really say it in the book, but wasn't there like the bird flu or something? Something happened with the chickens, right? That caused the downfall of it. What happened there?
Yeah, one of the main thing was what I talk about, which is essentially betrayal
Right.
of a lot of different people, and then at the same time, while that was happening, a bird flu came and It's called Newcastle disease, and it's a disease that infects chickens and sparrows and whatever wild birds there are, and that's how it's spread. And it's a respiratory disease. However, the eggs can't be eaten if the birds have the disease, and the meat can't be eaten, so therefore the chickens have to be destroyed. And that's one of the things that we went through during that time as well.
Yeah, and one of the things that was very interesting to me from a very young age, you were kind of groomed to run this company, right? And that was kind of what your whole thought process was, that you were going to run the chicken farm. You were going to be this person who, when your dad retired, it was going to be in your, and I'm guessing that your dad's probably one of those people that's like my dad, they'll never retire. They'll always have to be doing something. But you were going to take over somewhat, right?
Yeah, it's what my grandfather did. It's what my dad did, and it's what I was set up to do. It's what I enjoyed. It's what I loved. And come hell or high water, I was determined to make that happen.
Yeah, and then this happened, and it kind of became one of those deals where you were out to prove something to other people, and you decided you were going to go to school, which kind of led to a teaching degree, right? And then you taught for a while, and then you went back to law school. And then this is where everything kind of unwrapped, right? This is where things started going. You had the kidney issue, but then things started going south. Can you talk a little bit about one of the things that I don't think many people understand about a diabetic is the cost of all the care that you have to have? Because there are things that, especially with type 1, that you have to have every single day. Talk a little bit about the cost of those and kind of what you went through.
Yeah, so I think a lot of people are used to just having health insurance through various means, and being able to just afford getting sick every once in a while, or the once every 10 years quick hospital visit for a broken bone. But as a diabetic, you have a chronic illness that requires medication like insulin and the ability to test your blood sugars to give yourself insulin. And I was reliant upon that. I couldn't live without it. And in terms of getting the medication, it's very expensive. It's hundreds of dollars per bottle of insulin, and each diabetic needs numerous bottles of insulin per month. A lot of insurances only cover 1 to 2 bottles, and you might need 4 or 5. And so the out-of-pocket costs are just very extreme, even with health insurance, let alone having to pay out-of-pocket cash. Oh, and then like to test your blood, each test strip is $1, and you're expected to test yourself between 5 and 8 times a day. And and the doctor's appointments you have to go through every 3 months, and the lab work. And so it kind of becomes just the cycle that you're on. And then you start working to save money to afford your medical bills, and it kind of just becomes like this survival of okay, work to pay rent, work to pay food, work to pay health costs, and then at the end of the month you're like, okay, add it again. And so it's a never-ending cycle that you can't break, because I was required to have that to live.
One of the biggest things that kind of drove me crazy about the situation when hearing this, because my brother-in-law is a type 1 diabetic too, is understanding that you had to do something that you did not particularly love or want to do because you needed insurance. Talk about that a little bit, how it was, I felt like reading the book, I felt like it was tough because you realized that you didn't want to do what you got a degree in, you didn't want to teach, but you had no other choice. At that point, you were making a choice of, do I have health insurance or do I do something else? Can you talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, so before the Affordable Care Act, which it's kind of become part of life now, everyone recognizes it and uses it in one way or the other. But before the Affordable Care Act was passed, the laws in our country stated if you have a pre-existing condition, such as diabetes, you can't be covered by insurance, or an insurance company will not cover you individually. So if I went to a health insurance company and applied for insurance, I would be denied because of the pre-existing condition. So after the Affordable Care Act was passed, the pre-existing condition deter the discrimination there based on disability or illness was taken out and was now illegal, and that's what allowed me to no longer have to teach to get health insurance, but it allowed me to like move on, and that's kind of like where I was starting to able to like live life the way I wanted to, because I wasn't reliant upon a specific job to get the health insurance coverage for me to live.
You know, it's interesting because there's so much in the story about the drive that I feel like you have as a person, because listening to all the things that you're going through, you were bound and determined to get these things done. I mean, you had multiple surgeries trying to get to this internship in Washington, which it was just, the story was just amazing listening to how that happened. What gave you that thought process? What made you be so determined that you weren't going to let anything stop you from doing that?
I think being a diabetic from the age of 3, you just learn to cope. I'm sure it's your brother-in-law that's a type 1 diabetic, yeah. Right? Mm-hmm. Okay. I'm sure you're like other diabetics or people with chronic illness relate to this, because there's so many highs and lows within such a short amount of time that you just mentally and physically learn to pivot. It's like, okay, right now I'm about to pass out. I need to drink this Gatorade. I need to lay down and let my mind recover. Okay, I'm recovered. Now I can get back to work. And you just push through it, and you just do it. You get it done because you don't have a choice. You can just lay down and let the world roll over you, or you can get back up and try to jump back on the horse and keep riding. And it's kind of like, it's innate. It's second nature because of all the blows that you take as a diabetic or someone with chronic illness. You kind of learn to roll with the punches and to just keep going and to keep moving. And it's one of those things that I think also with that, and growing up on a farm where all the outcome was up to me, or it was up to my family, and just growing up within that kind of just made my mindset that set to a point where it didn't matter what was going on. I was hell bent on getting it done. I was hell bent on fixing something that was wrong. It wasn't okay with me, and that's kind of like the fuel that drove me to just keep going, even though looking back, it was like, why did I fight so hard for something that was kind of dumb? But that was my mindset.
Well, I don't necessarily that I would look at it as dumb, because I think that the fact of the matter is that you came out on the top end of it. And I think that nowadays there are so many people that give up. You know, my brother-in-law is type 1. He was actually diagnosed really late. So he was, I think, 30 when he got diagnosed with it. It was the weirdest thing. He just went through it, and his pancreas was shutting down, just like you were talking about. But just seeing that, like, you had 2 choices, and I think part of that is your upbringing. I mean, I'm guessing working on a chicken farm from a very young age. Are you the oldest?
Yeah.
Okay, so you probably had the most responsibilities besides your parents in that house. So you probably had to get up really early in the morning. You probably had to have some sort of process that you had to do every single day just before you got to school. And then you probably got home from school, and then you had to probably go back and do the same thing, right?
Oh, yeah.
So do you think that kind of played into part of that too? Like, there's this determination. It's just what I have to do. I need to do this because that's my life. That's what I do.
Yeah, for sure, absolutely, and it sounds like I was forced to do it, but I think it's just one of those things. You grow up within it, and you become so used to it, and it feels natural, so I think anyone that grows up on a farm, can relate to that. But a lot of people who don't get exposed to it don't quite understand that bit. And so I really tried to explain it well in terms of just the expectation of growing up on a farm with a family, and how it is teamwork, and everybody has to put in their fair share to make it work. or it doesn't work all that well.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think growing up where I grew up, I didn't live on a farm, but we lived out in the middle of nowhere. 7 miles from town on 5 acres, and we had friends that were farmers, and you just know that that's what's going on, and that's the type of ethic that those people have. I think that people who work like that have a better understanding of how things are meant to be or how to be determined, because it's their livelihood, right? The chicken farm was your livelihood, and then something happened, and then now it's taken away. And if you've put all your life on that and you don't have anywhere else to go, it makes you get really creative about how you're going to pay your bills, which, that happened to you, right? I mean, you're trying to pay for school. You can get student loans. You probably still have to pay those back, because I know I do. I've got, grants only go so far, right?
Yep.
So the farm kind of had some issues. You're in Washington, D.C. You go on a trip, and what happened on this trip?
I died.
You died. And this wasn't the only time, right? This happened more than one time.
Yeah. I mean, it's happened more than I can even recall. But yeah, the first time, it was really noticeable to me. I scared a lot of people. I was on vacation internationally, and it was really out of nowhere. And that instant is kind of what changed everything for me health-wise. That is when that realization hit me of, oh heck, there is something really wrong with me, and I have to get it figured out. Because waking up from a near-death experience is extremely eye-opening. In the telling you, hey, you don't want to go through this again.
And I want to talk a little bit about something that I read too. It said that you had a medical ID bracelet on, correct? That said that you were diabetic, and they didn't check that. And so, have you ever talked to anyone a little bit more about that? Because I feel like that's something that people should be aware of. It used to be like those commercials were on TV all the time. You get your medic alert bracelet or whatever, and check that first. I mean, because could the outcome have been a little different had they known that you were diabetic right away?
Yes. And, that's not the first time. That's not my only experience with that. I don't talk about that much, but it really is an issue. The medical ID bracelets, and you can get them for seatbelts. People get them tattooed on themselves.
Right.
I had a necklace that I wore. I had a bracelet that I wore in my wallet. It had it on my phone. It had all my information, and none of it, anytime I ever ran into issues where medical personnel was called for an emergency, no one ever checked those ID bracelets first. And that was kind of the first time that I realized that I've been wearing that bracelet since I was 3. I always had a medical ID on me. That I always informed the people that I was a diabetic if it was necessary. And this was one of those situations where everyone knew I was a diabetic. I had the medical ID bracelet on, and it was completely overlooked. No one really realized it until after the fact, when it would have been helpful at that moment.
Yeah, I think that's probably something that, really would be something that someone would want to look into, because I think that's, I've seen the tattoos before. I had a student when I was a teacher that had one of the tattoos that, said she was diabetic. And it's just amazing that, and maybe it's just in that heat of the moment, but if you have a trained professional, and obviously on a cruise ship, there's probably not a ton of them on there compared to at a hospital that would look at that. But you would think that would be the first thing to check and look and see oh, well, he could be having a diabetic problem. Let's get that squared away now first, and then see if that's what it is. So long process though. And you ended up having that happen a couple times, and then lots of doctor visits. And I mean, we could gloss over those, we could talk about them all, but we don't need to. But there was a lot of doctor visits in between here. I'm sure you've been poked and prodded in millions of different ways, lots of surgeries and all that stuff. But your kidney failed. And they took it, right? So now you only have one kidney, hoping that this would fix the problem, the passing out problem, the low blood sugars problem, and all that. And then they realized that wasn't going to fix it. You finally got, after, and and there's lots of doctor's visits involved in here, but you finally got someone to tell you what the real problem was. And what was that?
It was that my body could no longer process food correctly because my body was basically broken. It couldn't convert food into energy, and that is why I was having so many issues with my blood sugar. And when your blood sugar goes down, when they say hypoglycemia or you have a low blood sugar, it means that there is not enough sugar in your body to be fuel, and your brain starts shutting down. And usually it can be controlled by eating enough food, taking the right amount of insulin, or if you're not a diabetic, it just means that you're eating enough throughout the day to fuel your body. Well, when your body no longer does that, no matter what you do, it just burns it all at once instead of storing it and doing it accordingly. You get these episodes where your brain shuts down and you pass out, and if it goes too far, your heart stops. And so that's where I was. I had been dealing with it for 2 years, and I finally found a doctor who said, "Brandon, you need a pancreas-only transplant. The next low blood sugar episode you have, you will likely die, and you have less than 2 years to live if you don't get a pancreas-only transplant." And then the doctor said, "It's not covered by insurance, so I would beg, borrow, or steal any way you could to get this, because it's going to be the only thing that saves your life." And it hit me like a bus. I was like, what do I have to do to get a pancreas-only transplant? Because I was hell-bent on living, even though it was like the worst time of my life.
Yeah, and it's interesting because, there's a lot in between there, and definitely, like I said, you guys need to read the book, because there's a point where this is going to happen. And I was reading it, and like I said, it just started to get to that point where like the pages are turning faster and faster, because I kind of know your story because I've talked to you before, but it was one of those things that was like, man, it's going to happen for him. You've been through so much and to get what you needed to get, but there was still some hiccups in there. And I tell you, when I read what the person who was screening you after you gave them $20,000 said, I was just like, this lady, what is her problem? Who pissed in her Cheerios this morning that she wants to treat this guy who needs a life-saving procedure, who's going to pay cash for it, and tell him that he can't have it? But I feel like reading through that, you getting to have, it's obviously in the moment probably not what you wanted to do, but getting the counseling and talking to that person probably helped you a great deal more than just going through it just to go through it.
Yeah, I saw the benefit of it after the fact. But it's one of those things where the solvent to the biggest problem you have is right in front of you, and someone suddenly says,
yep.
oh, no.
Yeah.
You can't have it. You now have to go jump through these 5 hurdles real quick just because I don't feel like explaining it to you correctly, and I'm going to put a roadblock up for you.
Right.
And so, looking at it again, it's kind of like it could have, that situation could have been handled so much differently, just with given more information and presenting it better to someone who's dying, who's very sick and dying. And given the way that I react to things, it was like, oh, hell no.
Yeah.
Like I need to figure out how to get this solved immediately and get through it and break all barriers and get what is needed. And that was my attitude at the time.
Yeah. And it seemed like there wasn't a whole lot of compassion in that whole situation anyway, because she held the ticket to your life, basically. She's telling you whether you can live or die and how much time you have, and that was really hard for me. I was like, ugh.
Yeah, a non-medical person,
yeah,
lower educated non-medical person holds the ticket to me living or dying. Yeah, when the surgeon says, yes, you need that surgery today. So it's one of those very frustrating aspects of dealing with the health industry.
So we'll skip a little bit ahead because you did get the pancreas transplant, and you got it taken care of. Like I said, when people start reading that, I think that they're just going to be flying through that because they're going to be so excited that it happened. How are you today? How are things today? Because you've had that. Do you have to test your blood sugar every day, every hour? Do you still have to give yourself insulin, or are you done with that?
So right now, I had the pancreas transplant, and the pancreas controls. So think of me now as no longer survivant or reliant upon insulin to make me live, to make my body break down foods, because the transplanted pancreas produces insulin for me, and my body is able to produce it correctly, like it would with my native pancreas that died, and it controls my blood sugars. I no longer have those hypoglycemic episodes because it's working, and I no longer have to take insulin because my blood sugar is stable, because I have a working organ that failed me when I was 3. And so I'm not cured, because a lot of people like to say, oh, you're cured. I'm on immunosuppressants. I've been in really bad rejection 4 times. If this organ fails, I will then become insulin dependent again, and very likely that hypoglycemic, unaware, brittle type 1 diabetic. And so the costs and benefits are weighed, but every day I'm able to not have to worry about passing out and dying. And so to me, the benefit outweighs those costs.
And how's the healthcare now? Do you have insurance now? I mean, I know that there's tons of drugs that you have to take for having the new organ so that it doesn't get rejected. What do you have? How do you support that medical bill and all that stuff now? Do you have insurance, or were they able to get you that after you got the pancreas?
Yeah, so I was able to. So after the transplant and everything, it's recommended. They kind of tell you which plans to go with, because it's helpful in terms of getting the right care at the right hospitals. And so I was in Arizona. I had everything done there. I had paid cash. And then I moved to California because the access to insurance in California is just better. You get better options. There are different hospitals. And in Arizona, they only have 2 transplant hospitals, and Mayo Clinic doesn't accept very many insurances. So I was able to move to where I grew up, back to Southern California, and get access to better health insurance that allows me to go to doctors, and it covers a good portion of my medication. And I would say that it costs me more money now out of pocket than it did as a diabetic, because everything is more expensive. I have weekly lab work done. The medication is $6,000 to $8,000 per medication, and thankfully insurance covers a big. I have to pay 20%, and but I get to go see any doctor I want, and any hospital. And if I'm hospitalized, I don't have to pay for anything. So I'm very happy with the health insurance coverage right now, and I'm very thankful that I don't have to worry about trying to fundraise for myself to live.
Right.
Like I had to go through. So yeah, it comes right now. Everything there's ups and downs with everything, and I take it with a grain of salt, and I am so thankful to be alive, and that's just how I view it.
And so what are you doing now? Because we know you have a teaching degree. Have you passed the bar yet for law? Are you planning on continuing in law, or are you going to just endure on this whole new thing? Tell us a little bit about what you got going on right now.
Yeah, so right after transplant, because I went from doing everything in law and having like the highest point in my life that I possibly could achieve, to then having the lowest. And what I realized through that was the expectations I had on myself were a little bit unrealistic. I was trying to prove something wrong to someone, and I realized, I don't really need to. And so right now, law is not calling me. My goal was to get better, and I was working on this book, and I've been sharing my story. And right now I'm really happy with being a resource to people who have been through similar things like me, or who are going through similar things like me, because there wasn't anyone online talking about them having a pancreas-only transplant,
Right.
or being a brittle diabetic who was a male, because we don't like to share personal health journeys with people. It really isn't a thing. But when I realized how much of a need there was out there, I was doing that. So a big portion of my life is focused on sharing my journey and, just keeping people up to date on what this looks like. And then I take on side projects where I do consulting. I have little part-time jobs that allows me to pay my bills, but I don't care so much about worldly possessions like I used to. I don't care so much about achieving these great things as a lawyer. And so I don't know, that aspect of my life is still always open. I might go to it, but right now I'm really happy with just kind of trucking along and enjoying life as much as I can.
And so you've got the book out. Do you have any plans for another book or anything else in the future?
We'll see. I had a book tour and some really great speaking engagements lined up for when this was released last month. But unfortunately, with this new strain of COVID, everything had to be canceled. And I understand it. And this would have been out last summer, except for COVID. So at this point, it's kind of like it's on hold. We'll see what it turns into. But in the meantime, I have awesome people like you where I get to share, talk about it and share, and just hope that people can get a copy of it. Because if you're struggling with really anything in life, this book will kind of pep you up a little bit, because I've been through everything.
Yeah.
And I'm still here. And it's the happiest I've ever been. And I really do hope that people can read that and relate to it, and it makes them feel better about what they're going through instead of feeling like they're alone.
Yeah, and I think that's what's the great message behind the book, is the fact of the matter is that you can do whatever you want. And I think it's a great achievement of yours, because you had so many things going on and you never quit. You were bound and determined to live, and that's what you're doing. And now it's great to hear, because there's parts in the book where it sounds like you're a little angry, which is understandable, but it feels like now you're in this place where the anger's kind of gone and you're doing everything to fulfill your life because you have a second chance.
Yeah, and you really realize how precious life is when it's taken away from you, and all of a sudden you're given it back. It's kind of like you cannot be thankful. You cannot want to rejoice and just enjoy life and see what there is out there. And things get me mad, man. Insurance companies and pharmacies and the crookedness and backwardness of it all just torques you off. But it's part of life, and you learn to move on. And so that's kind of where I'm at with stuff right now. And I really am. I'm the happiest I've ever been. I'm not the healthiest, but I'm alive, and I genuinely cannot complain. I'm just very thankful.
Yeah. Well, I'm glad that we got a chance to catch up. I want to make sure, go ahead and plug your book one more time here. Let's talk about where we can find you. I want to make sure people know everything that there is to know.
Yeah, thank you. My name is Brandon Mouw. It's spelled M for Mary, O-U-W. Find me brandonmouw.com. I'm on Instagram, Brandon Mouw, Facebook, Twitter, and get my book. It's called I'm Still Kicking: Overcoming the Impossible When You're Mad at the World, and it's on Amazon, or just Google it and it will pop up. And it's a quick read, and you will like it. And I'm always here. I try to be a resource. I share my story, and if you ever have questions or want to know any information, I'm open. Ask me anything. I answer all questions, all emails. So I'm here as a resource, and thank you so much for this opportunity to share my story and talk about my book again.
Oh, no problem, man. I'm glad you're back. You guys, if you check out his website too, there's interviews, lists of them. You can see the original interview he did with me. He's been on a bunch of different podcasts. Great story. So, hey, Brandon, thanks again for taking the time. I really appreciate it.
Hey, thank you.
All right, everyone. Well, that's the end of the show. Thank you for tuning in. Until next time, I challenge you to find the shape of your success.